morning, good morning, good morning, Cal! Good morning, Kakarot! Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you guys doing today? I hope you guys are doing well. I'm on time for once! I am on time for once. I actually woke up early this morning. I couldn't go back to sleep, so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stay awake. Also, it doesn't help that my obnoxious old man neighbor, you could probably hear it, is doing the, he's doing his lawn again, so I couldn't sleep in even if I wanted to. You can probably hear it, he's doing his lawn again, that old jerk. Goofy transition. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Wasabi, good morning, good morning, good morning. I started early on time today, so no, it's not, I'm not an AI, Kakarot. I just woke up early today. I was able to actually make myself a good breakfast. So I actually had like an actual breakfast instead of just eating toast in the morning. Had me a cup of coffee here. I'm about to get me a bottle of water because I can't just drink coffee alone. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna get me a bottle of water from my mini fridge. And we'll get started because today we're doing Sherlock Holmes! I'm excited! Alright. Okay. I got a bottle of water. Cause your girl needs to drink more water. It has been nothing but the last few days has been nothing but energy drinks and caffeine. I have a problem. I have a caffeine problem. Which means I love me some coffee. So I gotta drink more water. I cursed Kay before they woke up to be self-aware of their breathing. Oh. You did. What the hell? Ooh, sounds like he caught a branch in his machine. Sounds like my neighbor caught a branch in his mower. Holy shit. You did. You cursed. Okay, so funny story. I woke up around 3 o'clock in the morning having like a slight asthma attack. And like, thank goodness my cats love me enough to be worried, because I probably would have been unalived if I if I didn't wake up in the middle of the night. I'm okay. I am perfectly fine. I did not die, clearly. That did scare me a little bit. Thankfully, my sweet booby boy sleeps with his mother, and noticed something was wrong and ended up stomping on my stomach to wake me up. Same with Beans. Beans sleeps in the same room, even though she has her own little basket. And she was also concerned. She jumped on the bed. She was like meowing at me. I was like, oh. First I thought, oh, I have to feed the cats, but then I realized, oh, I can't breathe. So I took care of it. I'm okay. I have my asthma pump handy at all times. I am okay. I am perfectly fine. The manual blinking, I blink. I don't think about blinking, so it just happens. You do always see your nose all the time. Your brain just chooses to ignore it. Also, you know your tongue can't actually fit comfortably in your mouth. Your tongue is too big for your mouth, so it doesn't always fit comfortably. But I'm okay. I am okay. I am perfectly okay. I am not dead. Mildly annoyed that my neighbor decides this now is the time to do his stupid lawn work. I do have a terrible caffeine addiction, by the way, yes. I do. I actually do. The only thing I don't really drink is soda. Like, I can't drink soda like that. It makes me sick. But coffee? Yes. Gamer subs? Absolutely. Teas? Give it to me. But, yeah. So, I'll wait for my neighbor to kind of move away. Keep the trying to have my neighbor move away. I closed my window so you can still hear it. It's so obnoxious. I hate that old man. He's like, I don't hate really anything. That old man, he's pushing the hate. He's pushing the hate in me. And I don't let hate go in me. I don't let hate flow through me like that. I refuse. I do not give in to the dark side. I don't drink Poggers energy drink. It's not great. It's not great. So glad I got out of that. Got out of that Stead sponsorship deal when I could. Ugh, it was not great. But Gamer Subs needs to sponsor me. Gamer Subs needs to sponsor me. Gamer Subs, please sponsor me. I love you so much. You were my one and only Oshi. I love you. Sponsor me, gamers. What are you guys talking about in the chat? What is happening? Okay, actually, no, I do not. Ew, that's disgusting. That is so gross, Cal, bruh. My boy, my dude, my friend, my homie, my home skillet biscuit. What are you talking about? It's so disgusting. Nasty. Ew. Ew. Cal, you're so gross. You're so gross. No, that's disgusting. You're I don't want to apply. I don't want to apply for Poggers. Never again. Definitely want to apply for Gamer Subs. I'm gonna apply for Gamer Subs. I'm gonna do that later. I don't eat boogers. Wasabi. Why am I being bullied today? I came here with a nice thick book of Sherlock Holmes stories to read to you guys today. You guys are mean. I'm about to cancel the stream. You guys are mean. Cal, stop it. You're gonna make me puke again. I don't want that. Thank you. Horrible. Horrible. Ugh. You're so gross, Cal. You're just so gross. Why am I being bullied on my own stream? What is this? Alright, forget you guys. I'm gonna start reading. You guys are mean. You guys are teasing me. You guys are bullying me. You're mean. You're gonna make me cry. No, I don't. I have a book. Okay, so I bought a book. It's called Sherlock Holmes Classic Stories by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's just a small selection of it's just a small selection of the Sherlock Holmes stories, because Arthur Conan Doyle, he wrote so many of these Sherlock Holmes stories. It's just like, it's just ridiculous. Cal, please stop with the boogies. You're gonna actively make me feel sick, and I had a big breakfast, so I'd rather not puke all that up. Thank you, please, and thank you. Boogers. Ugh. I don't know how anybody can eat their own boogers. I admire that you eat boogers and are resourceful. It shows you care about self-hygiene. Listen, no one, like, we all swallow our own mucus. That's just an inevitability. Anytime you snort in, like, a deep breath or whatever, it happens. That's natural. I tend to have a lot of mucus because I have terrible seasonal allergies. But I do not, and nor will I ever, actively pick my nose and eat my boogers. That is disgusting. That is like what small, wee baby children do. I do not do that. Alright, I may snort like that, but I do not actively eat my boogers. That is disgusting. In fact, I feel queasy just thinking about it, so I'm not going to. You expect your gross life traits? Listen. I do gross things. Everyone does gross things. It's just part of being human. Alright? Hygiene is also kind of gross. However, I do not know have I ever, since as an adult, ever eaten my boogers. As a child, probably. As a tiny wee baby child, maybe. But you know, as an adult, I do not do that. I am not 2 days. You're not an infant test tube lab experiment. I'm not an infant. I'm definitely a test tube lab experiment, but I'm not an infant. I am a full-grown adult. I'm a full-grown adult. Oh my god, this stream has taken a left turn rather quickly. But I'm not 2 days old. I'm at least several good years old. I have the equivalent age of a 30-year-old, okay? That's the cat genes in me. Cat genes in me caused me to grow up fairly quickly in a few years. But I am an adult. I think from what my creator says, I have peaked out in my aging, and now I'm aging like a normal human, but growing up, I aged rather quickly, so my childhood was very, very quick. But still very, very enjoyable, so I can't complain. I am a legal adult. I am a fully matured adult cat person. Thank you very much. Well, we're gonna get into the story time because you guys are so chaotic and I love it so much. Case legally 56. No, I'm not that old. I am legally 30. I am a legal adult. I am fully matured, fully grown. White hair is because I have albinism. I ended up being a white cat, even though my creator used black cat DNA. I got the albinoism, so I am white. I'm a white cat. Not by choice, by birth. It's just the albinism. That's really what it is. White cats are not actually a thing. It's just a form of albinism. Albinism. It's actually kind of funny. So white cats are just albinos. Not me. I'm an albino. I was supposed to be a black cat, but it happens. I'm okay with this. I actually quite like my white hair. I think it's kind of cool. You know how people like destroy their hair to just try to get a semblance of this color? I have it naturally, and I love it. It is such a pretty color. And you can never tell when I'm actually graying, so you know, it's a win-win. You know, you can't say, oh, Kate got gray hairs. Ha, joke's on you, my hair's always been gray. Albino black sheep, that's the most accurate description of me ever. But, yeah. You can never tell how old I am because my hair's already white. It has been forever. You can't tell how old I am. You can't tell that I'm getting old. And I have such a baby, I have a baby face too, so it's not like, so the gray hairs are the only thing that can show how I'm actually aging. Because if my hair's already gray, you can't even tell. I'm gonna look young forever. Because I got a baby face. Alright, we're gonna get into the story today. Last time we read a Sherlock Holmes story, we read The Musgrave Ritual. Today we're gonna read The Speckled Band, and if we have more time, we'll probably read another story. So I'm gonna get started. Stupid neighbor. I hate my stupid neighbor, I really do. He's such an old bat. I hate him. He's so rude. He's so rude. He does not care that other people are doing stuff. He does not care, you know, that his mower is super obnoxious. He just does not care. He's just so rude. Anyway. Okay. My butt nice and comfortable. Alright, we're gonna read into it. The Speckled Band. You're back! Yay, you're back, Kakarot! There was a lot of chaos that happened while you were away. But I'm glad you're back. I'm glad you're back. You solved the case. No, I'm not 56. My age is funny because I was created in a lab. I aged up like a cat for a few years. I aged rapidly. So I went from small baby child to full-grown adult fairly quickly. But my age has petered out since then, and I age like a normal human. And according to creator, I'm at the equivalent age of 30. So I'm assuming I'll be 31 on my next birthday. So you know, I'm only 30, according to creator. I have fully matured to the age of a 30. So yeah, I'm not old. I'm not 56. I'm not 56. Himbo Holmes. I can't imagine Sherlock Holmes being a himbo. That sounds horrifying. Yeah. I did not admit it. You can always play the VOD back. I did not admit that I'm 56. I'm not 56. I am 30. I am 30. So I'm gonna get into it now. It's a Speckled Band. You guys got cozy? Got a nice, you got a refreshing drink and your butt's comfortable. You know, you're comfy, cozy, and ready? Nah, I think that age must be 556. I don't think I can live that long. I'm still human. I'm still human. After all, I don't think I'll ever live that long. I'm pretty sure my lifespan is shortened considerably, considering I'm already half cat. So yeah, I don't know. You have a fully developed frontal lobe. That's real nice. I like that. Yeah, I like it too. I like that my frontal lobe is completely developed. As is the rest of me. Wink, wink. Sorry, my totally hot girlfriend Jenna came into the room and wants me to make her. Jesus Christ. Go enjoy your spaghetti and meatballs. I don't know about the whole Jenna Ortega thing. But you know. Enjoy your spaghetti and meatballs. And, yeah. I'm gonna continue the story. You doubt that? How rude. I'm not a demon, you know. There's a lot of demon cats out there. I am not. I am actually half human, half cat. I am a genetic abomination. I was created in a test tube, in the most literal sense. One day I'll take you to the lab. I'll take you to the lab one day where I was created. I'll take you there. It's downstairs in one of the sub-basements. Well, it's a recreation. Like, the original lab was in an apartment building before we moved to the house. So, yeah, it's basically the same, but bigger. I'll show you guys. I'll show you guys one day. I'll show you the lab I was created in one day. I get regular checkups there whenever I get sick, so, you know. I know. I have a total theory about that, but the story time, so, Also, I'm gonna go play Conan Exiles. Goodbye. Okay, you guys have fun! Just play me in the background. I hope you enjoy the story if you just play me in the background, so yeah. See you later, Wasabi. You enjoy your game. I'm gonna start reading because I'm already 20 minutes in here. We're already 20 minutes in and I haven't even started reading, so. But enjoy your game. Enjoy your game. I'm gonna start. You guys ready? You guys comfy cozy? Got a nice refreshing drink, a snack, a comfy seat to sit in? I hope you do, because I'm starting now. Okay? Ready? The Speckled Band. In glancing over my notes of the 70-odd cases in which I have, during the last 8 years, studied the methods of my friend Sherlock Holmes. You play me in the foreground? Aww. I appreciate that, Wasabi. You're lovely. You're a lovely, wonderful friend. Thank you. I find many tragic, some comic, a large number merely strange, but none commonplace. For, working as he did rather for the love of his art than for the acquirement of wealth, he refused to associate himself with any investigation which did not tend towards the unusual, and even the fantastic. Of all these varied cases, however, I cannot recall any which presented more singular features than that which was associated with the well-known Surrey family of the Roylotts of Stoke Moran. The events in question occurred on the early days of my association with Holmes, when we were sharing rooms as bachelors in Baker Street. It is possible that I might have placed them upon record before. Oh, he finished. Thank the stars. I don't know what it is about lawnmower sounds, but it weirdly grates in my brain. It feels like a cheese grater going to my brain. I hate it. It's just like, do not like. It is possible that I might have placed upon record before, but a promise of secrecy was made at the time, from which I have only been freed during the last month by the untimely death of the lady to whom the pledge was given. It is perhaps as well as the fact should come now into light, for I have reason to know that there are widespread rumors as to the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylott, which tend to make the matters even more terrible than the truth. It was early in April, the year 83, that I woke one morning to find Sherlock Holmes standing, fully dressed, by the side of my bed. He is a late riser as a rule, and, as the clock on the mantelpiece showed me that it was only 7:15, I blinked up at him in some surprise, and perhaps just a little bit of resentment, for I myself was regular in my habits. Very sorry to knock you up, Watson, he said, but it is the common lot this morning. Mrs. Hudson has been knocked up. She retorted upon me, and I on you. What is it then? A fire? By the way, your stream like I cleared the desert mine. Oh, nice! I am real. I do exist. I am a real person. Hello, Sarah. Don't worry about being late. You just missed a lot of the chaos that happened well before. I literally just started, so you are right on time. We had like 20 minutes of chaos before you came here, so you're just on time. So enjoy the story, friend. Thank you for being here. What is it then? A fire? No, a client. It seems that a young lady has arrived in a considerable state of excitement, who insists upon seeing me. She is waiting now in the sitting room. Now, when young ladies wander about the metropolis at this hour of the morning and knock sleepy people out of their beds, I presume that it is something very pressing which they have to communicate. Should it prove to be an interesting case, you would, I am sure, wish to follow it from the outset. I thought at any rate that I should call you and give you the chance. My dear fellow, I would not miss it for anything. Let's see. Sorry, my throat's a little itchy. So stupid allergies. I had no There we go. I had no keener pleasure than in following Holmes in his professional investigations, and in admiring the rapid deductions, as swift as intuitions, and yet always founded on a logical basis, with which he unraveled the problems which were submitted to him. I rapidly threw on my clothes and was ready in a few minutes to accompany my friend down to the sitting room. A lady dressed in black and heavily veiled, who had been sitting in the window, rose as we entered. "Good morning, madam," said Holmes cheerily. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. This is my intimate friend and associate, Dr. Watson, before whom you can speak as freely as before myself. Ha! I'm glad to see that Mrs. Hudson has had the good sense to light a fire. Pray draw upon it, and I shall order you a cup of hot coffee, for I observe that you are shivering." "It is not cold which makes me shiver," said the woman in a low voice, changing her seat as requested. "What then?" "It is fear, Mr. Holmes. It is terror." She raised her veil as she spoke, and we could see that she was indeed in a pitiable state of agitation, her face all drawn and gray, with restless, frightened eyes, like those of some hunted animal. Her features and figure were those of a woman of 30, but her hair was shot with premature gray, and her expression was weary and haggard. Sherlock Holmes ran her over with one of his quick, all-comprehensive glances. "You must not fear," he said soothingly, bending forward and patting her forearm. "We shall soon set matters right. I have no doubt you have come in by train this morning, I see." "You know me, then?" "No, but I observed the second half of our return ticket in the palm of your left glove. You must have started early, and yet you had a good drive in a dog cart, along heavy roads, before you reached the station." Excuse me. The lady gave a violent start, and stared in bewilderment at my companion. "There is no mystery, my dear madam," he said, smiling. "The left arm of your jacket is spattered with mud in no less than 7 places. The marks are perfectly fresh. There is no vehicle save a dog cart which throws up mud in that way, and then only when you sit on the left-hand side of the driver." "Whatever your reasons may be, you are perfectly correct," she said. "I started from home before 6, reached Leatherhead at 20 past, and came in by the first train to Waterloo. Sir, I can stand this strain no longer. I shall go mad if it continues. I have no one to turn to, none save only one, who cares for me, and he, poor fellow, can be of little aid. I have heard of you, Mr. Holmes. I have heard of you from Mrs. Farintosh, whom you helped in the hour of her sore need. It was from her that I had your address. Oh, sir, do you not think that you could help me, too, and at least throw a little light through the dense darkness which surrounds me? At present it is out of my power to reward you for your services, but in a month or 2 I shall be married, with the control of my own income, and then at least you shall not find me ungrateful." Holmes turned to his desk, and unlocking it, drew out a small case book, which he consulted. "Farintosh," he said. "Ah, yes, I recall the case. It was concerned with an opal tiara. I think it was before your time, Watson. I can only say, madam, that I shall be happy to devote the same care to your case as I did to that of your friend. As to reward, my profession is its reward, but you are at liberty to defray whatever expenses I may be put to, at the time which suits you best. And now I beg that you will lay before us everything that may help us in forming an opinion upon the matter." Alas, replied our visitor, the very horror of my situation lies in the fact that my fears are so vague, and my suspicions so depends on, and my suspicions depend so entirely upon small points, which might seem trivial to another, that even he to whom of all others I have a right to look for help and advice looks upon all that I tell him about it as the fancies of a nervous woman. He does not say so, but I can read it from his soothing answers and averted eyes. But I have heard, Mr. Holmes, that you can see deeply into the manifold wickedness of the human heart. You may advise me how to walk amid the dangers which encompass me. I am all attention, madam. Sorry, excuse me. My name is Helen Stoner, and I am living with my stepfather, who is the last survivor of one of the oldest Saxon families in England, the Roylotts of Stoke Moran, on the western border of Surrey. Holmes nodded his head. The name is familiar to me, he said. The family was at one time among the richest in England, and the estate extended over the borders into Berkshire in the north, and Hampshire in the west. In the last century, however, 4 successive heirs were of a dissolute and wasteful disposition, and the family ruin was eventually complete by a gambler, in the days of the Regency. Nothing was left save a few acres of ground and the 200-year-old house, which is itself crushed under a heavy mortgage. The last squire dragged out his existence there, living the horrible life of an aristocratic pauper, but his only son, my stepfather, seeing that he must adapt himself to the new conditions, obtained an advance from a relative, which enabled him to take a medical degree, and went out to Calcutta, where, by his professional skill and his force of character, he established a large practice. In a fit of anger, however, caused by some robberies which had been perpetrated in the house, he beat his native butler to death, and narrowly escaped a capital sentence. As it was, he suffered a long term of imprisonment, and afterwards returned to England a morose and disappointed man. When Dr. Roylott was in India, he married my mother, Mrs. Stoner, the young widow of Major General Stoner of the Bengal Artillery. My sister Julia and I were twins, and we were only 2 years old at the time of my mother's remarriage. She had a considerable sum of money, not less than 1,000 a year, and this she bequeathed to Dr. Roylott entirely when we resided with him, with a provision that a certain annual sum should be allowed to each of us in the event of our marriage. Shortly after our return to England, my mother died. She was killed 8 years ago in a railway accident near Crewe. Dr. Roylott then abandoned his attempts to establish himself in practice in London, and took us to live with him in the old ancestral home at Stoke Moran. The money which my mother had left was enough for all of our wants, and there seemed no obstacle to our happiness. But a terrible change came over our stepfather about this time. Instead of making friends and exchanging visits with our neighbors, who had at first been overjoyed to see a Roylott out of Stoke Moran back in the old family seat, he shut himself up in his home, and seldom came out save to indulge in ferocious quarrels with whomever might cross his path. Violence of temper approaching to mania had been hereditary in the men of the family, and in my stepfather's case it had, I believe, been intensified by his long residence in the tropics. A series of disgraceful brawls took place, 2 of which ended in the police court, until at last he became the terror of the village, and the folks would fly at his approach, for he is a man of immense strength, and absolutely uncontrollable in his anger. Last week he hurled the local blacksmith over a parapet into a stream, and it was only by paying over all the money I could gather together that I was able to avert another public exposure. He had no friend at all save the wandering gypsies, and he would give these vagabonds leave to encamp upon a few acres of bramble-covered land which represent the family estate, and would accept in return the hospitality of their tents, wandering away with them sometimes for weeks on end. He has a passion, also, for Indian animals, which are sent over to him by a correspondent, and he has at this moment a cheetah and a baboon which wander freely over his grounds, and are feared by the villagers almost as much as their master. You can imagine from what I say that my poor sister Julia and I have no great pleasure in our lives. No servant would stay with us, and for a long time we did all the work of the house. She was but 30 at the time of her death, and yet her hair has already begun to whiten, even as mine has. Hello, John. Hello. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I hope you're enjoying the story. We are reading Sherlock Holmes' story. This one is called The Speckled Band. So I hope you're enjoying it, friend. Thank you for being here. Adjust my sound settings just a little bit. Yes. Your sister is dead then. She died just 2 years ago, and it is of her death that I wish to speak to you. You can understand that, living the life which I had described, we were little likely to see anyone of our own age and position. We had, however, an aunt, my mother's maiden sister, Miss Honoria Westphale, who lives near Harrow, and we were occasionally allowed to pay short visits at this lady's house. Julia went there at Christmas 2 years ago, and met a half-pay major of Marines, to whom she became engaged. My stepfather learned of this engagement when my sister returned, and offered no objection to the marriage. But within a fortnight of the day which had been fixed for the wedding, a terrible event occurred which has deprived me of my only companion. Sherlock Holmes had been leaning back in his chair, with his eyes closed, and his head sunk in a cushion, but he half opened his lids now, and glanced across at his visitor. Pray, be precise as to details, he said. It was easy for me to be so, for every event of that dreadful time is seared into my memory. The manor house is, as I have already said, very old, and with only one wing now inhabited. The bedrooms in this wing are on the ground floor, and the sitting rooms being the central block of the buildings. Of these bedrooms, the first is Dr. Roylott's, the second my sister's, and the third my own. There is no communication between them, but they all open out into the same corridor. Do I make myself plain? Perfectly so. The windows of these 3 rooms open up onto the lawn. That fatal night Dr. Roylott had gone out to his room early, though we knew he had not retired to rest, for my sister was troubled by the smell of the strong Indian cigars, which it was his custom to smoke. She left her room, therefore, and came into mine, where she sat for some time, chatting about her approaching wedding. At 11 o'clock she rose to leave me, but she paused at the door and looked back. Tell me, Helen, she said, have you ever heard anyone whistle in the dead of the night? Never, said I. I suppose that you cannot possibly whistle yourself in your sleep. Certainly not, but why? Because during the last few nights I have always, about 3 in the morning, heard a low, clear whistle. I am a light sleeper, and it has awakened me. I cannot tell where it came from. Perhaps from the next room, perhaps from the lawn. I thought that I would ask you whether you've heard it. No, I have not, but it must have been those wretched gypsies in the plantation. Very likely, and yet if it were on the lawn, I wonder that you did not hear it also. Ah, but I sleep more heavily than you. Well, it is of no great consequence, at any rate. She smiled back at me and closed my door, and a few minutes later I heard her key turn in the lock. Indeed, said Holmes. Was it your custom always to lock yourselves in at night? Always. And why? I think that I mentioned to you that the doctor keeps a cheetah and a baboon. We had no feeling of security unless our doors were locked. Quite so. Pray proceed with your statement. I could not sleep that night. A vague feeling of impending misfortune impressed me. My sister and I, you will recollect, were twins, and you know how subtle are the links which bind 2 souls which are already so closely allied. It was a wild night. The wind was howling outside, and the rain was beating and splashing against the windows. Suddenly, amidst all the hubbub of the gale, there burst forth a wild scream of a terrified woman. I knew that it was my sister's voice. I sprang from my bed, wrapped the shawl around me, and rushed into the corridor. As I opened my door, I seemed to hear a low whistle, such as my sister described, and a few moments later a clanging sound, as if a mass of metal had fallen. I ran down the passage to my sister's door, and it was unlocked, and I revolved slowly upon its hinges. I stared at it, horror-stricken, not knowing what was about to ensue from it. By the light of the corridor lamp, I saw my sister appear at the opening, her face blanched with terror, her hands groping for help, her whole figure swaying to and fro like that of a drunkard. I ran to her and threw my arms around her, but at that moment her knees seemed to give way and she fell to the ground. She writhed as one who was in terrible pain, and her limbs were dreadfully convulsed. At first I thought she had not recognized me, but as I bent over her, she suddenly shrieked out in a voice which I shall never forget. "Oh my God, Helen! It was the band, the speckled band!" There was something else in which she would have fain have said, as she stabbed with her finger into the air in the direction of the doctor's room, but a fresh convulsion seized her and choked her words. I rushed out, calling loudly for my stepfather, and I met him hastened from his room in his dressing gown. When he reached my sister's side, she was unconscious, and though he poured brandy down her throat and sent for medical aid from the village, all efforts were in vain, for she slowly sank and died without having recovered her consciousness. Such was the dreadful end of my beloved sister. "One moment," said Holmes. "Are you sure about this whistle and metallic sound? Could you swear to it?" That was what the county coroner had asked me at the inquiry. It was my strong impression that I heard it, and among the crash of the gale and the creaking of the old house, I may possibly have been deceived. Was your sister dressed? No, she was in her nightdress. In her right hand was found the charred stump of a match, in her left the matchbox, showing that she had struck a light and looked about her when the alarm took place. That is important. And what conclusions did the coroner come to? He investigated the case with great care, for Dr. Roylott's conduct had long been notorious in the county. But he was unable to find any satisfactory cause of death. My evidence showed that the door had been fastened upon the inner side, and the windows were blocked by old-fashioned shutters with broad iron bars, which were secured every night. The walls were carefully sounded, and were shown to be quite solid all around, and the flooring was also thoroughly examined, with the same result. The chimney was wide, but is barred up by 4 large staples. It is certain, therefore, that my sister was quite alone when she met her end. Besides, there were no marks of any violence upon her. How about poison? The doctors examined her for it, but without success. What do you think that this unfortunate lady died of, then? It is my belief that she died of pure fear and nervous shock, though what it was that frightened her I cannot imagine. Were there gypsies in the plantation at the time? Yes, there are nearly always some there. And what did you gather from this allusion to a band? A speckled band. Sometimes I have thought it was merely the wild talk of a delirium. Sometimes that it may have referred to some band of people, perhaps these very gypsies in the plantation. I do not know whether the spotted handkerchiefs, which so many of them wear over their heads, might have suggested a strange adjective which she used. Holmes shook his head like a man who is far from being satisfied. "These are very deep waters," he said. "Pray go on with your narrative." 2 years have passed since then, and my life has been, until lately, lonelier than ever. A month ago, however, a dear friend, whom I have known for many years, has done me the honor to ask for my hand in marriage. His name is Armitage, Percy Armitage, the second son of Mr. Armitage of Cranewater, near Reading. My stepfather has offered no opposition to the match, and we are to be married in the course of the spring. 2 days ago, some repairs were started in the west wing of the building, and my bedroom wall has been pierced, so that I have to move into the chamber in which my sister died, and to sleep in the very bed in which she slept. Imagine, then, my thrill of terror when last night, as I lay awake, thinking over her terrible fate, I suddenly heard in the silence of the night the low whistle which had been the herald of her own death. I sprang up and lit a lamp, but nothing was to be seen in the room. I was too shaken to go to bed again, however, so I dressed, and as soon as it was daylight, I slipped down, got a dog cart at the Crown Inn, which is opposite, and drove to Leatherhead, from whence I have come on this morning, with one object of seeing you and asking your advice. You have done wisely, said my friend. But have you told me all? Yes, all. Miss Stoner, you have not. You are screening your stepfather. Why, what do you mean? For answers, Holmes pushed back the frill of black lace which fringed the hand that lay upon our visitor's knee. Five little livid spots, the marks of 4 fingers and a thumb, were imprinted upon the white wrist. You have been cruelly used, said Holmes. The lady colored deeply and covered her own injured wrist. He is a hard man, she said, and perhaps he hardly knows his own strength. There was a long silence, during which Holmes leans his chin upon his hands and stares into the crackling fire. This is a very deep business, he said at last. There are 1,000 details which I should desire to know before I decide upon our course of action. Yet we have not a moment to lose. If we were to come to Stoke Moran today, would it be possible for us to see over these rooms without the knowledge of your stepfather? As it happens, he spoke of coming into town today upon some most important business. It is probable that he will be away all day, and that there will be nothing to disturb you. We have a housekeeper now, but she is old and foolish, and I can easily get her out of the way. Excellent. You are not averse to this trip, Watson? By no means. Then we shall both come. What are you going to do yourself? I have 1 or 2 things which I would wish to know. I have 1 or 2 things which I would wish to do now that I am in town, but I shall return by the 12 o'clock train, so that to be there in time for your coming. As you may expect us early in the afternoon, I myself have some small business matters to attend to. Will you not wait and breakfast? No, I must go. My heart is lightening already since I have confined my troubles to you. I shall look forward to seeing you again this afternoon. She dropped her thick black veil over her face and glided out of the room. And what do you think of it all, Watson? Asked Sherlock Holmes, leaning back in his chair. It seems to me the most dark and sinister business. Dark enough and sinister enough. Yet if the lady is correct in saying that the flooring and walls are sound, and that the doors, window, and chimney are impassable, then her sister must have been undoubtedly alone when she met her mysterious end. What becomes then of these nocturnal whistles, and what of the very peculiar words of the dying woman? I cannot think. But we combine the ideas of whistles at night and the presence of a band of gypsies who are on intimate terms with this old doctor, and the fact that we have every reason to believe that the doctor has an interest in preventing his stepdaughter's marriage, the dying allusion to a band, and finally, the fact that Miss Helen Stoner heard a metallic clang, which might have been caused by one of those metal bars that secure the shutters falling back into its place. I think there is a good ground to think that the mystery may be cleared along those lines. But what, then, did the gypsies do? I cannot imagine. I see so many objections to any such a theory. And so do I. It is precisely for that reason that we are going to Stoke Moran today. I want to see whether the objections are fatal, or if they may be explained away. But what, in the name of the devil? The ejaculation had been drawn from my companion by the fact that our door had been suddenly dashed open, and that a huge man framed himself in the aperture. His costume was of a peculiar mixture of the professional and of the agricultural, having a black top hat, a long frock coat, and a pair of high gaiters, with a hunting crop swinging in his hand. So tall was he that his hat actually brushed the crossbar of the doorway, and his breadth seemed to span it across from side to side. A large face, seared with 1,000 wrinkles, burnt yellow with the sun, and marked with every evil passion, was turned from one to the other of us, while his deep-set, pile-shot eyes, and the high, thin, fleshless nose gave him somewhat the resemblance to a fierce old bird of prey. "Which of you is Holmes?" said Axe's apparition. "My name, sir, but you have the advantage of me," said my companion quietly. "I am Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran." "Indeed, doctor," said Holmes blandly. Pray take a seat. I will do nothing of the kind. My stepdaughter has been here. I have traced her. What has she been saying to you? It is a little cold for the time of the year, said Holmes. What has she been saying to you? Screamed the old man furiously. But I heard that the crocuses promise well, continued my companion imperturbably. Ha! You put me off, do you? Said our new visitor, taking a step forward and shaking his hunting crop. I know you, you scoundrel. I have heard of you before. You are Holmes the meddler. My friend smiled. Holmes the busybody. His smile broadened. Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack-in-Office. Holmes chuckled heartily. Your conversation is most entertaining, he said. When you go out, close the door, for there is a decided draught. I will go when I've had my say. Don't you dare meddle with my affairs. I know that Miss Stoner has been here. I traced her, and I am a dangerous man to fall foul of. See here. He stepped swiftly forward, seized the poker, and bent it to a curve with a huge brown hands. See that you keep yourself out of my grip, he snarled, and hurled the twisted poker into the fireplace as he strode out of the room. He seems a very amiable person, said Holmes, laughing. I am not quite so bulky, but if he had remained, I might have shown him that my grip was not so much more feeble than his own. As he spoke, he picked up the steel poker, and with a sudden effort, straightened it out again. Fancy his having the insolence to confound me with the official detective force. This incident gives zest to our investigation, however, and I only trust that our little friend will not suffer from her imprudence in allowing this brute to trace her. And now, Watson, we shall order breakfast, and afterwards I shall walk to the Doctor's Commons, where I hope to get some data which may help us in this matter. It was nearly 1 o'clock when Sherlock Holmes returned from his excursion. He held in his hand a sheet of blue paper, scrawled over with notes and figures. I've seen the will of his deceased wife, he said. To determine its exact meaning, I have been obliged to work out the prices of the investment with which it is concerned. The total income, which at the time of the wife's death was a little short of £1,100, is now, through the fall in agricultural prices, not more than £750. Each daughter can claim an income of £250 in case of marriage. It is evident, therefore, that if both girls had married, this beauty would have had the mere pittance, while even if one of them would be crippled. It is evident, therefore, that if both girls had married, this beauty would have had a mere pittance, while even one of them would cripple him to a serious extent. My morning's work has not been wasted, since it has proved that he has the very strongest motives for standing in the way of anything of the sort. And now, Watson, this is too serious for dawdling, especially as the old man is aware that we are interested ourselves in his affairs. So if you are ready, we shall call a cab and drive to Waterloo. I should be very much obliged if you would slip your revolver into your pocket. In Ellie's number 2 is an excellent argument with gentlemen who can twist steel pokers into knots. That and a toothbrush are, I think, all that we need. At Waterloo, we were fortunate in catching a train for Leatherhead, where we hired a trap at the station inn, and drove 4 or 5 miles through the lovely Surrey lanes. It was a perfect day, with a bright sun and a few fleecy clouds in the heavens. The trees and wayside hedges were just throwing out the first green shoots, and the air was full of the pleasant smell of the moist earth. To me, at least, there was a strange contrast between the sweet promise of the spring and the sinister quest upon which we were engaged. My companion sat in the front of this trap, his arms folded, his hat pulled down over his eyes, and his chin sunk upon his breast, buried in the deepest thought. Suddenly, however, he started, tapped me on the shoulder, and pointed over the meadows. "Look there," he said. A heavily timbered park stretched up in the gentle slope, thickening into a grove at the highest point. From amidst the branches, there jutted out the gray gables and high-roofed trees of a very old mansion. "Stoke Moran," he said. "Yes, sir. That be the house of Dr. Grimsby Roylott," remarked the driver. "There's some building going on there," said Holmes. That is where we are going." "There is a village," said the driver, pointing to a cluster of roofs some distance to the left. "But if you want to get to the house, you'll find it shorter to go over the stile. and settled by walking the footpath over the fields. There it is where the lady is walking. And the lady, I fancy, is Miss Stoner, observed Holmes, shading his eyes. Yes, I think we had better do as you suggest. We got off, paid our fare, and the trap rattled back on its way to Leatherhead. I thought it as well, said Holmes as he climbed the stile, that this fellow should think we had come up here as architects, or on some definite business. It may stop his gossip. Good afternoon, Miss Stoner. You see that we have been as good as our word. Our client of the morning had hurried forward to meet us with a face which spoke her joy. I've been waiting so eagerly for you, she cried, shaking hands with us warmly. All has turned out splendidly. Dr. Roylott has gone to town, and it is unlikely that he will be back before evening. We have had the pleasure of making the doctor's acquaintance, said Holmes. In a few words he sketched out what had occurred. Miss Stoner turned white to the lips as she listened. Good heavens, she cried. He has followed me, then. So it appears. He is so cunning that I never know when I am safe from him. What will he say when he returns? He must guard himself, for he may find that there is someone more cunning than himself upon his track. You must lock yourself from him tonight. If he is violent, we shall take you away to your aunt at Harrow's. Now we must make the best use of our time. So kindly take us at once to the rooms which we are to examine. The building was of grey lichen-blotched stone, with a high central portion and two curving wings, like the claws of a crab, thrown out on each side. At one of these wings, the windows were broken and blocked with wood boards, while the roof was partially caved in, a picture of ruin. Excuse me. The central portion was in little better repair, but the right-hand block was comparatively modern, and the blinds of the windows, with the blue smoke curling from the chimneys, showed that this was where the family resided. Some scaffolding had been erected against the end wall, and the stonework had been broken into, but there were no signs of any workmen at the moment of our visit. Holmes walked slowly up and down the ill-trimmed lawn, examining with deep attention the outsides of the windows. This, I take it, belongs to the room which you used to sleep, but the center one to your sisters, and the one next to the main building to Dr. Roylott's chamber. Exactly so, but I am now sleeping in the middle one. Pending the alterations, as I understand. By the way, there does not seem to be any very pressing need for repairs at this end wall. There were none. I believe that it was an excuse to move me from my room. Ah, that is suggestive. Now, on the other side of this narrow wing runs the corridor from which these three rooms open. There are windows in it, of course. Yes, but very small ones, too narrow for anyone to pass through. As you both lock your doors at night, your rooms were unapproachable from that side. Now, will you have the kindness to go into your room and bar your shutters? Miss Stoner did so, and Holmes, after careful examination through the open window, endeavored in every way to force the shutter open, but without success. There was no slit through which a knife could be passed to raise the bar. Then, with his lens, he tested the hinges, but they were of solid iron, built firmly into the massive masonry. He said, scratching his chin in some perplexity. My theory certainly presents some difficulties. No one could pass these shutters if they were bolted. Well, we shall see if the inside throws any light upon the matter. A small side door led into the whitewashed corridor from which the three bedrooms opened. Holmes refused to examine the third chamber, so he passed at once to the second, that in which Miss Stoner was now sleeping, and in which her sister had met her fate. It was a homely little room, with a low ceiling and a gaping fireplace, after the fashion of old country houses. A brown chest of drawers stood in one corner, a narrow white counterpaned bed in another, and a dressing table on the left-hand side of the window. These articles, with two small wicker-work chairs, made up all the furniture in the room, save for a square of Wilton carpet in the center. The boards, round, and the paneling of the walls were brown, worm-eaten oak, so old and discolored that it may have dated from the original building of the house. Holmes drew one of the chairs into a corner, and sat silent, all while his eyes traveled around and up and down, taking in every detail of the apartment. "Where does that bell communicate with?" he asked at last, pointing to a thick bell rope which hung down beside the bed, the tassel actually lying upon the pillow. "It goes to the housekeeper's room. It looks newer than the other things." "Yes, it was only put there a couple of years ago." "Your sister asked for it, I suppose?" "No, I never heard of her using it. We're used to always getting what we wanted for ourselves." "Indeed, it seems unnecessary to pull so nice a bell pull there. You will excuse me for a few minutes while I satisfy myself as to this floor." He threw himself down upon his face with his lens in hand, and crawled swiftly backwards and forwards, examining minutely the cracks between the boards. Then he did the same with the woodwork in which the chamber was paneled. Finally he walked over to the bed and spent some time staring at it, and running his eyes up and down the wall. Finally he took the bell rope in his hand and gave it a brisk tug. "Why, it's a dummy," he said. "It won't ring?" "No, it is not even attached to a wire. This is very interesting. You can see now that it is fastened to a hook just above where the little opening of the ventilator is." "How very absurd! I never noticed that before." "Very strange," murmured Holmes, pulling at the rope. "There are one or two very singular points about this room. For example, what a fool a builder must be to open a ventilator into another room, when, with the same trouble, he might have communicated with the outside air." "That is also quite modern," said the lady. "Done about the same time as the bell rope?" remarked Holmes. "Yes, there were several little changes carried out about that time. They seem to have been of the most interesting character. Dummy bell ropes and ventilators which do not ventilate. With your permission, Miss Stoner, we shall now carry out researches into the inner apartment." Dr. Grimsby's Royalot's chamber was larger than that of his stepdaughters, but was just as plainly furnished. A camp bed, a small wooden shelf full of books, mostly of a technical character, an armchair beside the bed, a plain wooden chair against the wall, a round table, and a large iron safe were the principal things which met the eye. Holmes walked slowly around and examined each and all of them with the keenest interest. "What's in here?" he asked, tapping the safe. "My stepfather's business papers." "Oh, have you seen inside then?" "Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was full of papers." "There isn't a cat in it, for example?" "No, what a strange idea." "Well, look at this." He took up a small saucer of milk which stood on top of it. "No, we don't keep a cat, but there is a cheetah and a baboon." "Well, yes, of course. Well, a cheetah is just a big cat, and yet a saucer of milk does not go very far in satisfying its wants, I dare say. There is one point which I should wish to determine." He squatted down in front of the wooden chair and examined the seat of it with the greatest attention. "Thank you, that is quite settled," he said, rising and putting his legs in his pocket. "Hello, here is something interesting." The object which had caught his eyes was a small dog lash hung on one corner of the bed. The lash, however, was curled upon itself and tied so as to make a loop of whipcord. "What do you make of that, Watson?" "It's a common enough lash, but I don't know why it should be tied." "That's not quite so common, is it? Ah me, it's a wicked world, and when a clever man turns his brains to crime, it is the worst of all. I think I have seen enough now, Miss Stoner, and with your permission, we shall walk out upon the lawn." I had never seen my friend's face so grim, or his brow so dark, as it was when we turned from the scene of this investigation. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break in upon his thoughts before he roused himself from his reverie. "It is very essential, Miss Stoner," he said, "that you should absolutely follow my advice in every respect." "I shall most certainly do so." "The matter is too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your compliance." "I assure you that I am in your hands." "In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room." Both Miss Stoner and I gazed at him in astonishment. Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that is the village inn over there. Yes, that is the Crown. Very good. Your windows will be visible from there. Certainly. You must confine yourself to your room, on presence of a headache, when your stepfather comes back. Then when you hear him retire for the night, you must open the shutters of your window, undo the hasp, put your lamp there as a signal to us, and then withdraw with everything which you are likely to want in the room which you used to occupy. I have no doubt that, in spite of the repairs, you can manage there for one night. Oh, yes, easily. The rest you will leave in our hands. But what will you do? We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of this noise which has disturbed you. I believe, Mr. Holmes, that you have already made up your mind, said Miss Stoner, laying her hands upon my companion's sleeve. Perhaps I have. Then for pity's sake, tell me what it was the cause of my sister's death. I should prefer to have a clearer proof before I speak. You can at least tell me whether my own thought is correct, and if she died from some sudden fright. No, I do not think so. I think that there was probably some more tangible cause. And now, Miss Stoner, we must leave you, for if Dr. Roylott returns and saw us, our journey will be in vain. Goodbye, and be brave, for if you will do what I have told you, you may rest assured that we shall soon drive away the dangers that threaten you. Sherlock Holmes and I had no difficulty in engaging a bedroom and sitting room in the Crown Inn. They were on the upper floor, and from our window we could command the view of the avenue gate and of the inhabited wing of Stoken Run Manor House. At dusk, we saw Dr. Grimsby Roylott drive past, his huge form looming up beside the little figure of a lad who drove him. The boy had some slight difficulty in undoing the heavy iron grates, and we heard the hoarse roar of the doctor's voice. We saw the fury in which he shook his clenched fist at him. The trap drove on, and in a few minutes we later saw a sudden light spring up among the trees as the lamp was lit in one of the sitting rooms. Do you know, Watson, said Holmes as we sat together in the gathering darkness, I have really some scruples as to taking you tonight. There's a distinct element of danger. Can I be of assistance? Your presence might be invaluable, and I shall certainly come. It is very kind of you. Spaghetti made. Enjoy that spaghetti, my friend. Your presence might be invaluable, and I shall certainly come. It is very kind of you. You speak of danger. You have evidently seen more of these rooms than was visible to me. No, but I fancy that I may have deduced a little more. I imagine that you saw all that I did. I saw nothing remarkable save the bell rope, and what purpose that could answer, I confess, is more than I can imagine. You saw the ventilator, too. Yes, but I do not think that it is such a very unusual thing to have a small opening between two rooms. It was so small that a rat could hardly pass through. I knew that we should find a ventilator before we ever came to Stoken Run. My dear Holmes. Oh, yes, I did. You remember in her statement that she had her sister. You remember in her statement she said that her sister could smell Dr. Roylott's cigar. Now, of course, that suggests at once there must be a communication between the two rooms. It could only be a small one, or would have been remarked upon by the coroner's inquiry. I deduced the ventilator. But what harm can there be in that? Well, there's at least a curious coincidence of dates. A ventilator is made, a cord is hung, and a lady who sleeps in the bed dies. Does that not strike you? I cannot as yet see any connection. Did you observe anything very peculiar about the bed? No. It was clamped to the floor. Did you ever see a bed fastened like that before? I cannot say that I have. The lady could not move her bed. It must always be in the same relative position to the ventilator and to the rope, or so we may call it, since it was clearly never meant to be a bell pull. Holmes, I cried, I seem to see dimly what you are hinting at. We are only just in time to prevent some subtle and horrible crime. Subtle enough and horrible enough. When a doctor does go wrong, he is the first of criminals. He has the nerve and he has the knowledge. Palmer and Pritchard were among the heads of the profession. This man strikes even deeper, but I think, Watson, that we shall be able to strike deeper still. But we shall have horrors enough before the night is over. For goodness sake, let us have a quiet pipe and turn our minds for a few hours to do something more cheerful. Not me for your girlfriend? Yes, your girlfriend. I hope that your girlfriend enjoys it. Spaghetti. I think I might want to make spaghetti for dinner tonight. That actually sounds really good. Water. Before I continue, I just want to say, I have a terrible habit of repurposing bottles. So I am currently drinking water out of an old glass rum bottle with that has a cork on it. Because the bottle was so charming, I just couldn't let myself just get rid of it after the rum was gone. It was a coconut rum too, a very delicious coconut rum. But the bottle was so charming I couldn't get rid of it, so now I use it for water. But of course, every time I take out the cork stopper, it sounds like I'm drinking a bottle of booze. I save my drinking for the weekend. I don't have an alcoholism problem. Promise. My drinking is for the weekend only. Because it's a bad decision weekend. Weekends are for bad decisions. Be irresponsible responsibly. But yeah. So I have a cute little. So if you hear it going like that, I don't know if you heard that. It's just like pop. It's just water. Because I like to reuse things. I don't like to just throw things away. If it can be reused, I reuse it. And this is a glass rum bottle that I just use for water. It's so charming. Such a charming little bottle. Alright. About 9 o'clock and the light among the trees were extinguished, and all was dark in the direction of the manor house. 2 hours passed slowly away, and then suddenly, just at the stroke of 11, a single bright light shone out right in front of us. "That is our signal," said Holmes, springing to his feet. "It comes from the middle window." As we passed out, he exchanged a few words with the landlord, explaining that we were going on a late visit to an acquaintance, and that it was possible they might spend the night there. A moment later we were out on the dark road, a chill wind blowing in our faces, and one yellow light twinkling from us through the gloom to guide us on our somber errand. There was a little difficulty in entering the grounds, for unrepaired breaches gaped in the old park wall. Making our way among the trees, we reached the lawn, crossed it, and were about to enter through the window when we found that a clump of laurel bushes there darted with what seemed to be a hideous and distorted child, who threw itself on the grass with writhing limbs, and then ran swiftly across the lawn into the darkness. "My God," I whispered. "Did you see that?" Holmes was for a moment as startled as I. Excuse me. His hand closed like a vice upon my wrist in his agitation. Then he broke into a low laugh and put his lips to my ear. "It is a nice household," he murmured. That is the baboon." I had forgotten the strange pets which the doctor affected. There was a cheetah, too. Perhaps we might find it upon our shoulders at any moment. I confess... my goodness, excuse me. I confess that I felt easier in my mind when, after following Holmes' example and slipping off my shoes, I found myself inside the bedroom. My companion noiselessly closed the shutters, moved the lamp onto the table, and cast his eyes around the room. All was as we had seen in the daytime. Then, creeping up to me and making a trumpet of his hand, he whispered into my ear again so gently that it was all that I could do to distinguish the words. The least sound would be fatal to our plans. I nodded to show that I had heard. You made a That's alright, Kakarot. It's all good. Water. I drink a lot of water. I still have my coffee, but I need to drink a lot more water. Let's see. We must sit without light, he would see it through the ventilator. I nodded again. Do not go to sleep. Your very life may depend upon it. Have your pistol ready in case we should need it. I will sit on the side of the bed and you in that chair. I took out my revolver and laid it on the corner of the table. Holmes had brought up a long, thin cane, and this he placed upon the bed beside him. By it he laid the box of matches and the stump of a candle. Then he turned down the lamp, and we were left in darkness. How shall I ever forget that dreadful vigil? I could not hear a sound, not even the drawing of a breath, and yet I knew that my companion sat open-eyed, within a few feet of me, the same state of nervous tension in which I was myself. The shutters cut off the least ray of light, and we waited in absolute darkness. From outside came the occasional cry of a night bird, and once at our very window a long drawl, a cat-like whine, which told us that the cheetah was indeed at liberty. Far away we could hear the deep tones of the parish clock, which boomed out every quarter of an hour. How long they seemed, those quarters! 12 struck, and 1, and 2, and 3, and still we sat waiting silently for whatever might befall. Suddenly there was a momentary gleam of light up in the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately, succeeded by a strong smell of burning oil and heated metal. Someone in the next room had lit a dark lantern. I heard a gentle sound of movement, and then all was silent once more, though the smell grew stronger. For half an hour I sat with straining ears. Then suddenly another sound became audible. A very gentle, soothing sound, like that of a small jet of steam escaping continuously from a kettle. The instant that we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, struck a match, and lashed furiously with his cane at the bell pull. "You see it, Watson?" he yelled. "You see it?" But I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the light, I heard a low, clear whistle, but the sudden glare flashing into my weary eyes made it impossible for me to tell what it was at which my friend lashed so savagely. I could, however, see that his face was deathly pale and filled with horror and loathing. He had ceased to strike and was gazing up at the ventilator when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible cry to which I have ever listened. It swelled up louder and louder, a hoarse yell of pain and fear and anger all mingled in one dreadful shriek. They say that away down in the village and even in the distant parsonage, that cry raised the sleepers from their bed. It struck cold to our hearts, and I stood gazing at Holmes, and he at me until the last echoes of it died away into the silence from which it rose. "What can it mean?" I gasped. "It means that it is all over," Holmes answered. "And perhaps, after all, it is for the best. Take your pistol and we shall enter Dr. Roylott's room." With a grave face, he lit up the lamp and led the way down to the corridor. Twice he struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then he turned the handle and entered, I at his heels, with a cocked pistol in my hand. With a grave face, he lit the lamp and led the way. Oh yeah, I already said that. Ha! It was a singular sight which met our eyes. On the table stood a dark lantern with the shutter half open, throwing a brilliant beam of light upon the iron safe, the door of which was ajar. Beside this table, on the wooden chair, sat Dr. Grimsby Roylott, clad in a long grey dressing gown, his bare ankles protruding beneath, and his feet thrust into red heelless Turkish slippers. Across his lap lay the short stock with the long lash which we had noticed during the day. His chin was cocked upward, and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful rigid stare at the corner of the ceiling. Round his brows he had a peculiar yellow band with brownish speckles, which seemed to be bound tight around his head. As we entered, he made neither sound nor motion. The speckled band," whispered Holmes. I took a step forward, and in an instant his strange headgear began to move, and there reared itself from among his hair the squat diamond-shaped head and puffed neck of a loathsome serpent. "It's a swamp adder," cried Holmes, "the deadliest snake in India. He has died within 10 seconds of being bitten. Violence does, in truth, recoil upon the violent, and the schemer falls into the pit in which he digs for another. Let us thrust this creature back into its den, and we can then remove Miss Stoner to some place of shelter, and let the county police know what has happened." As he spoke, he drew the dog whip swiftly from the dead man's lap and thrown the noose around the reptile's neck. He drew it from his horrid perch, carrying it at arm's length, threw it into the iron safe, which he closed upon it. Such are the true facts of the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran. It's not necessary that I should prolong a narrative which has already been run too great at length, by telling how we broke the sad news to the terrified girl, how he conveyed her by the morning train to take care of her good aunt in Harrow, of how the slow process of official inquiry came to the conclusion that the doctor met his fate while indiscreetly playing with a dangerous pet. The little which I had yet to learn of the case was told to me by Sherlock Holmes as we traveled back the next day. Caffeine is an intoxicating substance, and I love it. Yeah, I do too. To a point of addiction, but you know, I don't drink. I do love my caffeine. I do love my caffeine, whether it's from chocolate, coffee, whatever it is. But I'm trying to cut back. You know, it's not too good to have a lot of it all the time. I don't drink large cups of coffee either. I have like a very small, short cup, like a 6-ounce cup of coffee, like a 4 to 6 ounce cup of coffee, very small cup, not a lot. But still, I drink coffee like every day, so that's just like not great. Plus the gamer subs and then whatever else I may be eating and drinking during the day, I have to cut down just a little bit. So I'll have like a cup of coffee once every other day instead. I had, said he, come to an entirely erroneous conclusion, which shows, my dear Watson, how dangerous it always is to reason from insufficient data. The presence of the gypsies, and the use of the word band, which was used by the poor girl, no doubt, to explain the appearance of which she had caught in a hurried glimpse by the light of her match, were sufficient to put me upon an entirely wrong scent. I can only claim the merit that I instantly reconsidered my position when, however, it became clear to me that whatever danger threatened an occupant of the room could not come either from the window or to the door. My attention was speedily drawn, as I have already remarked to you, to this ventilator and to the bell rope which hung down by the bed. The discovery that this was a dummy, and that the bed was clamped to the floor, instantly gave rise to the suspicion that the rope was there as a bridge for something passing through the hole and coming to the bed. The idea of a snake instantly occurred to me, and when I coupled it with my knowledge that the doctor was furnished with a supply of creatures from India, I felt that I was probably on the right track. The idea of using a form of poison which could not possibly be discovered by any chemical test was just such as one will occur to a clever and ruthless man who had an Eastern training. The rapidity in which such a poison would take effect will also, from his point of view, be advantageous. It would be a sharp-eyed coroner, indeed, who could distinguish the two little dark punctures, which would show where the poisoned fangs had done their work. Then I thought of the whistle. Of course, he must recall the snake before the morning light revealed it to the victim. He had trained it, probably by the use of the milk which we saw, to return to him when summoned. He would put it through the ventilator at the hour that he thought best, with the certainty that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. It might or might not bite the occupant. Perhaps she might escape every night for a week, but sooner or later she must fall a victim. I come to these conclusions before ever I had entered the room. An inspection of this chair showed me that he had been in the habit of standing on it, which of course would be necessary in order that he should reach the ventilator. The sight of the safe, the saucer of milk, and the loop of whipcord were really enough to finally dispel any doubts which may have remained. The metallic clang heard by Miss Stoner was obviously caused by her stepfather's hastily closing the door of his safe upon its terrible occupant. Having once made up my mind, you know the steps which I took in order to put the matter to the proof. I heard the creature hiss, and I have no doubt that you also did, and I instantly lit the light and attacked it, with the result of driving it through the ventilator, and also with the result of it causing to turn upon its master at the other side. Some of the blows of my cane came home, and roused its snakish temper, so that it flew upon the first person it saw. In this way I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Grimsby Roylott's death, and I cannot say that it is likely to weigh very heavily upon my conscience. Wow, that's brutal. He'd be like, I may have accidentally caused a man's death, and I don't think I'll actually feel sorry for it. That's what he said. Brutal! Holy crap. Ah, that was good. That was the Speckled Band. Do we have time for another one? Absolutely. And I am going to read it. You already know. You already know. Let's see. I'm gonna take a quick break for a second, catch my breath, clear out my nose because my allergies decided to be in full swing today too. So, blech. Doesn't help that I am growing some flowers. That I'm currently growing some flowers and I have them sitting by my windowsill in the room. So some new fresh pollen from young flowers is gonna be coming up my nose too. It kind of sucks. But yeah. Well, thankfully, my neighbor finally stopped mowing his lawn. That was very annoying. Yes. We have time. We have time for another one. Yes. We have time for another story. I'm going to read another story. Let's see. The 5 Orange Pips. That's the next one. Okay. When I glanced over my notes and records of the Sherlock Holmes cases between the years 82 and 90, I am faced by so many which present strange and interesting features that it is no easy matter to know which to choose and which to leave. Some, however, have already gained publicity through the papers, and others have not offered a field for those peculiar qualities which my friend possessed in so high a degree, and which it is the object of these papers to illustrate. Some, too, have baffled his analytical skill, and would be as narratives, beginnings without an ending, while others have been but partially cleared up, and have their explanations founded rather upon conjecture and surmise than that on absolute logical proof that was so dear to him. There is, however, one of these last which was so remarkable in its detail and so startling in its results that I am tempted to give some account of it, in spite of the fact that there are points and connections with it which never have been, and probably never will be, entirely cleared up. The year 87 furnished us with a long series of cases of greater or less interest, of which I retained the records. Among my headings under this one, 12 months, I found an account of the adventure of the Parallel Chamber of the Amateur Mendicant Society, who held a luxurious club in the lower vault of a furniture warehouse, of the facts connected with the loss of the British bark Sophie Anderson, of the singular adventure of the Grease Pattersons in the island of Ufa, and finally of the Camberwell poisoning case. In the latter, as may be remembered, Sherlock Holmes was able, by winding up Dead Man's Watch, to prove that it had been wound up 2 hours ago, and that therefore the deceased had gone to bed within that time, a deduction which was the greatest importance in the clearing up the case. All of these I may sketch out on some future date, but none of them present such singular features as the strange train of circumstances which I have now taken up my pen to describe. It was the latter days of September, and the equinoctial gales had set in with exceptional violence. All day the wind had screamed and the rain had beaten against the windows, so that even here in the heart of great handmade London, we were forced to raise our minds for the instant from routine of life, and to recognize the presence of those great elemental forces which shriek at mankind through the bars of his civilization, like untamed beasts in a cage. As evening drew in, the storm grew higher and louder, and the wind cried and sobbed like a child in the chimney. Sherlock Holmes sat moodily at one side of the fireplace, cross-indexing his records of crime, whilst I at the other was deep in one of Clark Russell's fine sea stories, until the howl of the gale from which without seemed to blend with the text, and the splash of the rain to lengthen out the long swash of the sea waves. My wife was on a visit to her aunts, and for a few days I was a dweller once more in my old quarters at Baker Street. "Why," said I, glancing up at my companion, "that was surely the bell. Who could come tonight? Some friend of yours, perhaps?" Except yourself, I have none, he answered. I do not encourage visitors. A client, then? If so, it is a serious case. Nothing less would bring a man out on such a day and at such an hour, but I take it that it is more likely to be some crony of the landlady's. Sherlock Holmes was wrong in his conjecture, however, for there came a step in the passage and a tapping at the door. He stretched out his long arm to turn the lamp away from himself and towards the vacant chair upon which a newcomer must sit. Come in, he said. The man who entered was young, some 22 at the outside, well-groomed and trimly clad, with something of refinement and delicacy in his bearings. The streaming umbrella which he held in his hand and his long shining waterproof told of the fierce weather through which he had come. He looked about him anxiously at the glare of the lamp, and I could see that his face was pale and his eyes heavy, like those of a man who is weighted down by some great anxiety. I owe you an apology, he said, raising his golden pince-nez to his eyes. I trust that I am not intruding. I fear that I have brought some traces of the storm and rain into your snug chamber. Give me your coat and umbrella, said Holmes. They may rest up here upon the hook and will dry presently. You have come up from the southwest, I see. Yes, from Horsham. That clay and chalk mixture which I see upon your toe caps is quite distinctive. I have come for your advice. That is easily got. And help. That is not always so easy. I have heard of you, Mr. Holmes. I have heard from Major Prendergast how you saved him at the Tankerville Club scandal. Ah, of course. He was wrongfully accused of cheating at cards. He said that you could solve anything. He said too much. That you are never beaten. I have been beaten 4 times. 3 times by men and once by a woman. But what is that compared with the number of his successes? It is true that I have been generally successful. Then you may be so with me. I beg that you will draw your chair up to the fire and favor me with some details as to your case. It is no ordinary one. None of those which come to me are. I am the last court of appeal. And yet I question, sir, whether, in all your experience, you have ever listened to a more mysterious and inexplicable chain of events than those which have happened in my own family. You fill me with interest, said Holmes. Pray give us the essential facts from the commencement, and I can afterwards question you to all those details which seem to me be at most important. The young man pulled his chair up and pushed his wet feet out towards the blaze. My name, he said, is John Openshaw, but my own affairs have, and as far as I can understand it, little to do with this awful business. It is a hereditary matter, so in order to give you an idea of the facts, I must go back to the commencement of the affair. You must know that my grandfather has 2 sons, my uncle Elias and my father Joseph. My father had a small factory at the Coventry, which he enlarged at the time of the invention of bicycling. He was the patentee of the Openshaw unbreakable tire, and his business met with such success that he was able to sell it and to retire upon a handsome competence. My uncle Elias emigrated to America when he was a young man and became a planter in Florida. He was reported to have done very well. At the time of the war, he fought in Jackson's army, and afterwards under Hood, where he rose to be a colonel. When Lee laid down his arms and my uncle returned to his plantation, where he remained for 3 or 4 years, about 1869 or 1870, he came back to Europe and took a small estate in Sussex, near Horsham. He has made a very considerable fortune in the States, and his reason for leaving them was to reversion to his... God, I hate this already. He had made a very considerable fortune in the States, and his reason for leaving them was his aversion to the Negroes, and his dislike of the Republican policy in extending the franchise to them. He was a singular man, fierce and quick-tempered, very foul-mouthed when he was angry, and of a most retiring disposition. During all the years that he lived at Horsham, I doubt if he ever set foot in the town. He had a garden and 2 or 3 fields around his house, and there he would take his exercise, though every often for weeks on end he would never leave his room. He drank a great deal of brandy and smoked very heavily, but he would see no society and did not want any friends, not even his own brother. He didn't mind me. In fact, he took a fancy to me, for at the time when he saw me first, I was a youngster of 12 or so. This would be in the year 1878, and after he had been 8 or 9 years in England. He begged my father to let me live with him, and he was very kind to me in his way. When he was sober, he used to be fond of playing backgammon and draughts with me, and he would make me his representative both with the servants and with the tradespeople. So by the time I was 16, I was quite master of the house. I kept all the keys and could go where I liked and do what I liked, as long as I did not disturb him in his privacy. There was one singular exception, however, for he had a single room, a lumber room among the attics, which he was invariably locked, and which he would never permit either me or anyone else to enter. With a boy's curiosity, I have peeped through the keyhole, but was never able to see more than such a collection of old trunks and bundles as would be expected in such a room. One day, it was in March 1883, a letter with a foreign stamp laid upon the table in front of the colonel's plate. It was not a common thing for him to receive letters, for his bills were all paid in ready money. He had no friends of any sort. From India, he said, as he took it up. Pondicherry postmark. What can this be? Opening it hurriedly, out there jumped 5 little dried orange pips, which pattered down upon his plate. I began to laugh at this, but the laugh was struck from my lips at the sight of his face. His lips had fallen, his eyes were protruding, his skin the color of putty, and he glared at the envelope which he still held in his trembling hand. K, 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 he shrieked, and then, my God, my sins have overtaken me. What is it, uncle? I cried. Death, he said, rising from the table and retired to his room, leaving me palpitating in horror. I took up the envelope and saw scrawled in red ink upon the inner flap, just above the gum, the letter K 3 times repeated. There was nothing else save the 5 dried pips. What could be the reason of his overpowering terror? I left the breakfast table, and I ascended the stairs and met him coming down with an old rusty key, which must have belonged to the attic, in one hand, and a small brass box, like a cash box, in the other. They may do what they like, but I'll checkmate them still, he said with an oath. Tell Mary that I shall want a fire in my room today, and send down to Fordham, the Horsham lawyer. I did as he ordered, and when the lawyer arrived, I was asked to step up to the room. The fire was burning brightly, and in the grate was a mass of black, fluffy ashes, as of burnt paper, while the brass box stood open and empty beside it. As I glanced at the box, I noticed, with a start, that upon the lid were printed the treble K, which I had read in the morning upon the envelope. I wish you, John, said my uncle, to witness my will. I leave my estate, with all its advantages and all of its disadvantages, to you. To my brother, your father, whence it will, no doubt, descend to you. If you can enjoy it in peace, well and good. If you find you cannot, take my advice, my boy, and leave it to your deadliest enemy. I am sorry to give you such a two-edged thing, but I can't say what turn things are going to take. Kindly sign the paper where Mr. Fordham shows you. I signed the papers as directed, and the lawyer took it away with him. The singular incident made, as you may think, the deepest impression upon me, and I pondered over it, and turned it every way in my mind without being able to make anything of it. Yet I could not shake off the vague feeling of dread which it had left behind it, and the sensation grew less keen as the weeks passed, and nothing happened to disturb the usual routine of our lives. I could see a change in my uncle, however. He drank more than ever, and he was less inclined for any sort of society. Most of his time would be spent in his room, with the door locked upon the inside, but sometimes he would emerge in a sort of drunken frenzy, would burst out of the house and tear about the garden with a revolver in his hand, screaming out that he was afraid of no man, that he was not to be cooped up like a sheep in a pen by man or devil. When these hot fits were over, however, he would rush tumultuously in at the door, lock and bar it behind him, like a man who can brazen it out no longer against the terror which lies at the root of his soul. At such times I have seen his face, even on a cold day, glistening with moisture as though it were new raised from a basin. Well, to come to an end of the matter, Mr. Holmes, and not to abuse your patience, there came a night when he made one of those drunken sallies for which he never came back. We found him, when we went to search for him, face down in a little green scum pool, which lay at the foot of the garden. There was no sign of any violence, and the water was but 2 feet deep, so the jury, having regard to know his eccentricity, brought it in a verdict of suicide. But I, who knew how he winced from the very thought of death, had much ado to persuade myself that he had gone out of his way to meet it. The matter passed, however, and my father entered into possession of the estate and of some £14,000, which lay to his credit at the bank. "One moment," Holmes interposed. "Your statement is, as I foresee, one of the most remarkable to which I have ever listened. Let me have the date of the reception by your uncle of the letter, and the date of his supposed suicide." The letter arrived on March the 10th, 1883. His death was 7 weeks later, upon the night of May the 2nd. "Thank you. Pray proceed." When my father took over the Horsham property, he, at my request, made a careful examination of the attic, which had always been locked up. Found the brass box there, although its contents had been destroyed. On the inside of the cover was a paper labeled the initials KKK repeated upon it, and letters, memoranda, receipts, and a register, written beneath. These, we presume, indicated the nature of the papers, which had been destroyed by Colonel Openshaw. For the rest, there were nothing of much importance in the attic, save a great many scattered papers and notebooks bearing upon my uncle's life in America. Some of them were of the war time, and showed that he had done his duty well, and had borne the repute of being a brave soldier. Others were of a date during the reconstruction of the southern states, as were most concerned with politics, for he had evidently taken a strong part in opposing the carpetbag politicians who had been sent down from the north. Well, it was the beginning of '84, and my father came to live at Horsham, and all went well as possible with us until the January of '85. On the 4th day after the New Year, I heard my father give a sharp cry of surprise as we sat together at the breakfast table. There he was, sitting with a newly opened envelope in one hand and 5 dried orange pips in the outstretched palm of the other. He had always laughed at what he called my cock-and-bull story about the colonel, but he looked very puzzled and scared now that the same thing had come upon himself. "Why, what on earth does this mean, John?" he stammered. My heart had turned to lead. "It is KKK," I said. He looked inside the envelope. "So it is," he cried. "Here are the very letters. But what is this written above it?" "Put the papers on the sundial," I read, peeping over his shoulders. "What papers? What sundials?" he asked. "The sundial in the garden. There is no other," said I. "But the papers must be those that are destroyed." "Pooh," he said, gripping hard at his courage. "We are in a civilized land here. We cannot have tomfoolery of this kind. Where does the thing come from?" "From Dundee," I answered, glancing at the postmark. "Some preposterous practical joke," he said. What have I to do with sundials and papers? I shall take no notice of such nonsense." "I shall certainly speak to the police," I said. "And be laughed at for my pains? Nothing of the sort." "Then let me do so." "No, I forbid you. I would not have a fuss made over such nonsense." It was in vain to argue with him, for he was a very obstinate man. I went about, however, with a heart which was full of forebodings. On the 3rd day after the coming of the letter, my father went from home to visit an old friend of his, Major Freebody, who was in command of one of the forts upon Portsdown Hill. I was glad that he should go, for it seemed to me that he was farther from danger when he was away from home. In that, however, I was in error. Upon the 2nd day of his absence, I received a telegram from the Major, imploring me to come at once. My father had fallen over in one of the deep chalk pits which abound the neighborhood, and was lying senseless with a shattered skull. I hurried to him, but he passed away without having ever recovered his consciousness. He had, as it appeared, been returning from Fareham in the twilight, as the country was unknown to him, and the chalk pit unfenced. The jury had no hesitation in bringing in a verdict of death from accidental causes. Carefully as I examined every fact connected with his death, I was unable to find anything which could suggest the idea of murder. There were no signs of violence, no footmarks, no robbery, no records of strangers having been seen upon the road. And yet I need not tell you that my mind was far from at ease. and that I was well certain that some foul plot had been woven around him. In this sinister way I came to my inheritance. You will ask me why I did not dispose of it. I answer because I was well convinced that our troubles were in some way dependent upon an incident in my uncle's life, and that the dangers would be as pressing in one house as it was in the other. It was January 85 that my poor father met his end, and 2 years and 8 months have elapsed since then. During that time I have lived happily at Horsham, and I have begun to hope that this curse has passed away from the family, and that it had ended with the last generation. I had begun to take comfort too soon, however. Yesterday morning the blow fell in the very shape in which it had become upon my father. The young man took from his waistcoat a crumpled envelope and turned it onto the table. He shook out upon it 5 little dry orange pips. This is the envelope, he continued. The postmark is London, Eastern Division. Within are the very words which upon my father's last message, K, and then put the papers on the sundial. What have you done? Asked Holmes. Nothing. Nothing? To tell the truth, he sank his face into his thin, white hands. I have felt helpless. I have felt like one of those poor linebacks that had to pick up food delivery. Yum! Enjoy your meal, Kakarot. To tell the truth, he sank his hands into his thin, white hands. I have felt helpless. I have felt like one of those poor rabbits when the snake is writhing towards it. I seem to be in the grasp of some resistless, inexorable evil, which no foresight and no precaution can guard against. Tut tut, cried Sherlock Holmes. You must act, man, or you are lost. Nothing but energy can save you. This is no time for despair. I have seen the police. But they listened to my story with a smile. I am convinced that the inspector has formed the opinion that the letters are all practical jokes, and that the deaths of my relations were really just accidents, as the jury had stated, and were not to be connected with the warnings. Holmes shook his clenched hands in the air. Incredible imbecility, he cried. They have, however, allowed me a policeman who may remain at the house with me. Has he come with you tonight? No, his orders were to stay in the house. Again, Holmes raved in the air. Why did you come to me, he said, and above all, why did you not come at once? I did not know. It was only today that I spoke to Major Prendergast about my troubles, and was advised by him to come to you. It is really 2 days since you had the letter. We should have acted before this. You have no further evidence, I suppose, that which you have placed before us, no suggestive detail which might help us. There is one thing, said John Openshaw. He rummaged into his coat pocket and drew out a piece of discolored blue-tinted paper, and laid it out upon the table. I have some remembrance, he said, that on the day when my uncle burned the papers, I observed that the small, unburnt margins which laid among the ashes were of this particular color. I found this single sheet upon the floor in his room, and I am inclined to think that it may be one of the papers of which has, perhaps, fluttered out from among the others, and in that way has escaped destruction. Beyond the mention of pips, I do not see that it helps us much. I think myself that it is a page from some private diary. The writing is undoubtedly my uncle's. Holmes moved up the lamp, and we both bent over the sheet of paper, which shone by its ragged edge that it had indeed been torn from a book. It was headed March 1869, and beneath it were following enigmatical notices. 4th, Hudson came up, same old platform. 7th, set the pips on Macaulay, Paramore, and John Swain of St. Augustine. 9th, Macaulay cleared. 10th, John Swain cleared. 12th, visited Paramore. All well. Thank you, said Holmes, folding up the paper and returning it to our visitor. Now you must on no account lose another instant. We cannot spare time even to discuss what you have told me. You must get home instantly and act. What shall I do? There is but one thing to do. It must be done at once. You must put this piece of paper to which you have shown us into the brass box which you have described. You must also put in a note to say that all the other papers were burned by your uncle, and this is the only one which remains. You must assert that in such words as will carry a conviction to them. Having done this, you must at once put the box upon the sundial as directed. Do you understand? Entirely. Do not think of revenge or any of the sort at present. I think we might gain that by means of the law, for we have our web to weave, while theirs is already woven. The first consideration is to remove the present danger which threatens you. The second is to clear up the mystery and to punish the guilty parties. I thank you, said the young man, rising and pulling on his overcoat. You have given me fresh life and hope. I shall certainly do as you advise. Do not lose an instant, and above all else, take care of yourself in the meanwhile, for I do not think there can be a doubt that you are threatened by a very real and imminent danger. How do you go back? By train from Waterloo. It is not yet 9. The streets will be crowded, so I trust that you may be in safety, and yet you cannot guard yourself too closely. I am armed. That is well. Tomorrow I shall set to work upon your case. Shall I see you at Horsham, then? No, your secrets lie in London. It is there that I shall seek it. Then I shall call upon you in a day, or in 2 days, with news as to the box and the papers. I shall take your advice in every particular. He shook hands with us and took his leave. Outside the wind still screamed, and the rain splashed and pattered against the windows. This strange, wild story seemed to have come to us from amid the mad elements, blown in upon us like a sheet of seaweed in a gale, and now have been reabsorbed by them once more. Sherlock Holmes sat for some time in silence with his head sunk forward, and his eyes bent upon the red glow of the fire. Then he lit his pipe, leaned back in his chair, and watched the blue smoke rings as they chased each other upon up to the ceiling. I think, Watson, he remarked at last, that of all our cases we've had none more fantastic than this. Save perhaps the Sign of 4. Well, yes, save perhaps that. And yet this John Openshaw seems to me to be walking amid even greater perils than the Sholtos. But have you, I asked, formed any definite conception to what these perils are? There can be no question as to their nature, he answered. Then what are they? Who is this KKK, and why does he pursue this unhappy family? Sherlock Holmes closed his eyes and placed his elbows upon the arms of his chair, with his fingertips together. The ideal reasoner, he remarked, would, when he has once been shown a single fact in all of its bearings, deduce from it not only the chain of events which led up to it, but also the result which would follow from it. As Cuvier could correctly describe a whole animal by the contemplation of a single bone, so the observer who has thoroughly understood one link in a series of incidents, and should be able to accurately state all the other ones, both before and after. We have not yet grasped the result of which the reason alone can attain to. Problems may be solved in the study which have baffled all those who have sought a solution by the aid of their senses. To carry the art, however, is to its highest pitch. It is necessary that the reasoner should be able to utilize all the facts which have come to his knowledge, and in this itself implies, as you will readily see, a possession of all knowledge, which, even in these days of free education and encyclopedias, is a somewhat rare accomplishment. It is not so impossible, however, that a man should possess all knowledge which is likely to be useful to him in his work, and this I have endeavored in my case to do. If I remember rightly, you on one occasion, in the early days of our friendship, defined my limits in a very precise fashion. Yes, I answered, laughing. It was a singular document. Philosophy, astronomy, and politics were marked at 0, I remember. Botany variable, geology profound as regards the mud stains of any region within 50 miles of town, chemistry eccentric, anatomy unsystematic, sensational literature, and crime report unique, violin player, boxer, swordsman, lawyer, and self-poisoner by cocaine and tobacco. Those, I think, were my main points of my analysis. Holmes grinned at the last item. Well, he said, I say now, as I said then, that a man should keep his little brain attic stocked with all the furniture that he is likely to use, and the rest can be put away in the lumber room of his library, where he can get it if he wants. Now, for such a case as the one which has been submitted to us tonight, we need certainly to muster all our resources. Kindly hand me down the letter K of the American Encyclopedia, which stands upon the shelf beside you. Thank you. Now let us consider the situation and see what may be deduced from it. In the first place, we may start with the strong presumption that Colonel Openshaw has some very strong reasonings for leaving America. Men at his time of life do not change all their habits, and exchange willingly the charming climate of Florida for the lonely life of an English provincial town. His extreme love for solitude in England suggests the idea that he was in fear of someone or something, which drove him from America. As to what it was he feared, we can only deduce that by considering the formidable letters which were received by himself and his successor. Did you remark the postmarks from those letters? The first one was from Pondicherry, the second was from Dundee, and the third from London. From East London. What do you deduce from that? They are all seaports, that the writer was aboard a ship. Excellent. We already have a clue, and there can be no doubt that the strong probability, that is, the writer was on board of ship. And now let us consider another point. In the case of Pondicherry, 7 weeks elapsed between the threat and its fulfillment. In Dundee, there was only some 3 or 4 days. Does that suggest anything? A greater distance to travel? But the letter had also a greater distance to come. Then I do not see a point. There is at least a presumption that the vessel in which the man or men are is a sailing ship. It looks as if they are always sent in their singular warning or token before them when starting upon their mission. You see how quickly the deed followed the sign when it came from Dundee. If they had come from Pondicherry in a steamer, they would have arrived almost as soon as their letter. But as a matter of fact, 7 weeks elapsed. I think that those 7 weeks represented the difference between the mail boat which brought the letter and the sailing vessel which brought the writer. I got some work to do. Bye, KC at the Hangman stream. Absolutely, and do your thing. Do your thing. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I shall see you on Thursday. Take care. I'm going to finish this story. That way, everyone has it for the VOD later. It is possible. More than that, it is probable. And now you see the deadly urgency of this news case, and why I urged young Openshaw to caution. The blow has always fallen at the end of the time which it would take the senders to travel a distance. But this one comes from London, and therefore we cannot count upon delay. Good God, I cried. What can it mean, this relentless persecution? Oh my God, it's the Brit guy. Hi! How are you doing, friend? I hope you're doing well. I'm just reading this story. The 5 Orange Pips by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is a Sherlock Holmes story. I'm just reading it because I have some extra time and I think I'm going to read through this. So I hope you're enjoying the story, friend. I hope you're doing well today. I hope you're doing well. So yes, I hope you're enjoying the story as well. So, sit back, relax, enjoy a nice cup of coffee or tea or whatever, and a snack, and just enjoy. Good God, I cried. What can it mean, this relentless persecution? The papers which Openshaw carried are obviously of vital importance to the person or persons in the sailing ship. I think that it is quite clear that there must be more than one of them. A single man could not have carried out 2 deaths in such a way as to deceive a coroner's jury. There must have been several in it, and there must have been men of resource and determination. The papers they mean to have, be the holder of them whom it may. I shall enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here. I'm doing well. I am doing well. My allergies are kicking my butt, but I'm doing well. So thank you for asking. Let me start that over again. The papers which Openshaw carried are obviously of vital importance to the person or persons in the sailing ship. I think that it is quite clear that there must be more than one of them. A single man could not have carried out 2 deaths in such a way as to deceive a coroner's jury. There must have been several in it, and there must have been men of resource and determination. The papers they meant to have, be the holder of them who it may. In this way you see KKK cease to be the initials of an individual, but become a badge of the society. But of what society? Have you never, said Sherlock Holmes, bending forward and sinking his voice, have you never heard of the Ku Klux Klan? I never have. Holmes turned over the leaves of the book upon his knee. Here it is, he said presently. Ku Klux Klan, a name derived from the fanciful resemblance to the sound produced by cocking of a rifle. This terrible secret society was formed by some ex-Confederate soldiers in the Southern states after the Civil War, and it rapidly formed a local branch in different parts of the country, notably in Tennessee, Louisiana, the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. Its power was used for political purposes. principally for the terrorizing of the Negro voters, and the murdering and driving from the countries of those who were opposed to its views. Its outrages were usually preceded by a warning sent to the marked man in some fantastic, but generally recognized shape, a sprig of oak leaves in some parts, melon seeds or orange pips in others. On receiving this, the victim might either openly abjure his former ways, or might fly from the country. If he braved the matter out, death would unfailingly come upon him, and usually in some strange and unforeseen manner. So perfectly was the organization of the society, and so systematic in its methods, that there hardly is a case upon record where any man succeeded in braving it with impunity, or in which any of its outrages were traced home to the perpetrators. For some years the organization flourished, in spite of the efforts of the United States government, and of the better classes of the communities of the South. Eventually, in the year 1869, the movement rather suddenly collapsed, although there have been sporadic outbreaks of the same sort since that date. You will observe, said Holmes, laying down the volume, that the sudden breaking up of the society was coincident with the disappearance of Openshaw from America with the papers. It may well have been cause and effect. It is no wonder that he and his family have some of the more implicatable spirits upon their tracks. You can understand that this register and diary may implicate some of the first men in the South, and that there may be many who will not sleep easy at night until it's recovered. From the pages we have seen, it is such we might expect. It ran, if I remember right, sent to the pips to A, B, and C. That is, sent to the society's warning to them. There are successive entries that A and B cleared or left the country, and finally C was visited with, I fear, a sinister result for C. Well, I think, Doctor, that we may let some light into this dark place, and I believe that the only chance young Openshaw has in the meantime is to do what I have told him. There's nothing more to be said or done tonight, so hand me over my violin and let us try to forget for half an hour the miserable weather and the still more miserable ways of our fellow men. It had cleared in the morning, and the sun was shining with a subdued brightness through the dim veil which hangs over the great city. Sherlock Holmes was already at breakfast when I came down. You will excuse me for not waiting for you, he said. I have, I foresee, a very busy day before me in looking into this case of young Openshaw's. What steps will you take? I asked. It will very much depend upon the result of my first inquiries. I may go down to Horsham after all. You will not go there first? No, I shall commence with the city. Just ring a bell, and the maid will bring up your coffee. As I waited, I lifted the unopened newspaper from the table and glanced my eye over it. It rested upon a heading which sent chills to my heart. Holmes, I cried, you are too late. Ah, he said, laying down his cup. I feared as much. How was it done? He spoke calmly, but I could see that he was deeply moved. My eye caught the name of Openshaw in the heading, Tragedy near Waterloo Bridge. Here is the account. Between 9 and 10 last night, Police Constable Cook, of the H Division, on duty near Waterloo Bridge, heard a cry for help and a splash in the water. The night, however, was extremely dark and stormy, so that, in spite of the help of several passers-by, it was given impossible to the effect of a rescue. The alarm, however, was given, and by the aid of the water police, the body was eventually recovered. It proved to be that of a young gentleman whose name, as it appeared from an envelope which he found in his pocket, was John Openshaw, and whose residence is near Horsham. It is conjectured that he may have been hurrying down to catch the last train from Waterloo Station, that in his haste and extreme darkness he missed his path and walked over to the edge of one of the small landing places for river steamboats. The body exhibited no trace of violence, and there can be no doubt that the deceased has been the victim of an unfortunate accident, which should have the effect of calling the attention of the authorities to the condition of the riverside landing stages. We sat in silence for some minutes, Holmes more depressed and shaken than I had ever seen him. That hurts my pride, Watson, he says at last. It is a petty feeling, no doubt, but it hurts my pride. It becomes a personal matter with me now, and, if God sends me health, I shall send my hand upon this gang, that he should come to me for help, and that I should send him away to his death. He sprang from his chair and paced about the room in uncontrollable agitation, with a flush upon his sallow cheeks and a nervous clasping and unclasping of his long, thin hands. They must be cunning devils, he exclaimed at last. How could they have destroyed him down there? The embankment is not on the direct line to the station. The bridge, no doubt, was too crowded, even on such a night, for their purpose. Well, Watson, we shall see who will win in the long run. I am going out now. To the police? No, I shall be my own police. When I have spun the web, they may take the flies, but not before. All day I was engaged in my professional work, and it was later in the evening before I returned to Baker Street. Sherlock Holmes had not come back yet. It was nearly 10 o'clock before he entered, looking pale and worn. He walked up to the sideboard and, tearing a piece from the loaf, devoured it voraciously, washing it down with a long draught of water. You are hungry, I remarked. Starving. It had escaped my memory. I have had nothing since breakfast. Nothing. Not a bite. I had no time to think of it. And how have you succeeded? Well, you have a clue? I have them in the hollow of my hand. Young Openshaw shall not remain long unavenged. Why, Watson, let us put their own devilish trademark upon them. It is well thought of. What do you mean? He took out an orange from the cupboard, and tearing it to pieces, he squeezed out the pips from the table. Of all of these, he took 5 and thrust them into an envelope. On the inside of the flap, he wrote, S.H. for J.O. Then he sealed it and addressed it to Captain James Calhoun, Baroque Lone Star, Savannah, Georgia. That will awaken when he enters port, he said, chuckling. May I give him a sleepless night? He will find it as sure as a precursor of the fate as Openshaw did before him. And who is this Captain Calhoun? The leader of the gang. I shall have the others, but he first. How do you trace it, then? He took a long sheet of paper from his pocket, all covered with dates and names. I have spent the whole day, said he, over Lord's registers and files of the old papers, following the future career of every vessel which touched at Pondicherry in January and in February of '83. There were 36 ships of fair tonnage which were reported there during those months. Of these, one, the Lone Star, instantly attracted my attention, since, although it was reported to have cleared from London, the name that which it is given to one, the name is that which is given to one of the states in the Union. Texas, I think. I was not, and am not sure which, but I knew that the ship must have an American origin. Wow. I was not, and am not sure which, but I knew that the ship must have an American origin. What then? I searched the Dundee records, and when I found that the Baroque Lone Star was there in January '85, my suspicions became a certainty. Then I inquired as to vessels which lay at present in the port of London. Yes, the Lone Star had arrived here last week. I went down to the Albert Dock and found that she had been taken down the river by early tide this morning, homeward bound to Savannah. I wired to Gravesend and learned that she had passed some time ago, as the wind is easterly, and I have no doubt that she is now past the good winds, and not very far from the Isle of Wight. What will you do then? Oh, I have my hand upon him. He and the 2 mates are, as I learned, the only native-born Americans in the ship. The others are Finns and Germans. I know also that they were all 3 away from the ship last night. I have it from the stevedore. I had it from the stevedore? I had it from the stevedore that has been loading their cargo. By the time that their sailing ship reaches Savannah, and the mailboat will have carried this letter, and the cable will have informed the police of Savannah that these 3 gentlemen are badly wanted here upon a charge of murder. There is ever a flaw, however, in the best laid of human plans, and the murderers of John Openshaw were never to receive the orange pips, which would show them that another, as cunning and resolute as themselves, was upon their track. Very long and severe were the equinoctial gaze that year. We waited long for the news of the Lone Star of Savannah, but none ever reached us. We did at last hear that somewhere far out in the Atlantic, a shattered stern post of a boat was seen swinging in the trough of a wave with the letters LS carved upon it, and that is all which we shall ever know of the fate of the Lone Star. Oof. That was that was kind of sad, actually. Oh no, that was actually kind of sad. But, I'm gonna call it here. We got to read 2 stories today, which is pretty nice. I definitely want to read more of these Sherlock Holmes stories. I look forward to doing so. But thank you all so much for being here. Thanks so much for hanging out for me. Thanks for the chaos in my chat. I'm starting to lose my voice between the weather, the allergies, and all this talking. I'm starting to lose my voice just a little bit. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to make myself a nice cup of tea and soothe my throat. And yeah, thank you guys. Oh my god, thank you guys so. Excuse me. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Thanks so much for being here and stopping by. I guess I'll see you not tomorrow. I'll see you guys Thursday for the Hanged Man. Ow. So I'll see you guys on Thursday for the Hanged Man. So enjoy the rest of your day today. Enjoy your day tomorrow. Take good care of yourselves. And remember, hug your friends. Tell someone you love them. And be a force for good in the world, because goodness knows the world needs more goodness. I'll see you guys on Thursday for a little bit more of the Hanged Man. And yeah, take good care of yourselves. I love you all so very much. And I'll be seeing you. Bye.